What's going on, guys? Today we'll be taking a look at the Firefly 7S action camera by Hawkeye. Now, if you're familiar with action cameras, then you know that GoPro has a pretty tight grip on the market. However, there are a couple of other manufacturers that are starting to pick up the pace. Today we'll find out where Firefly stands in all this. Now, GearBest did send this out to me for review, but as always, I'll be giving you guys my unbiased opinion. With that said, let's get to it. This is the Firefly 7S action camera by Hawkeye. Inside the box, you'll find your standard manual and a ton of mounting options and accessories. These mounts and accessories include one holder, one J-shaped mount, one tripod mount, one long connector, two short connectors, one bike mount that attaches to your handlebar or seat post, two basic mounts, one USB cable, one metal cable tie, 4 plastic cable ties, one cleaning cloth, one clip, 2 adhesive pads, 2 belts, one hook, one pad, and the Firefly 7S action camera housed inside a waterproof case. In terms of dimensions and weight, the Firefly 7S is 5.90 by 2.10 by 4.10 centimeters in size and weighs 0.07 kilograms. Now, these dimensions are relatively similar to GoPro's, so you'll have the added benefit of using GoPro's accessories. On the side of the device, you'll find right and left rocker buttons for moving through the menus. Also, holding down the right arrow button will enable the Wi-Fi mode. This device also includes an app that you can pair with to remotely control the camera. Also up top, you have your action button. This button is used for menu selection, capturing photos, video playback, and starting and stopping recording. On the rear, you have a 2-inch LCD with a display resolution of 640 by 480. Off to the side, you have a micro SD, a micro HDMI, and a micro USB. And up front, you have your lens. Now, they're claiming that this lens is distortionless, but that's not entirely true. You have the option of shooting in the 120-degree field of view, which will give you a wider field of view, but will lead to some distortion. Or you have the option of shooting in a 90-degree field of view, which is a smaller field of view, but will eliminate distortion. However, this will reduce image quality. So technically the lens isn't distortionless, it's actually the field of view that's distortionless. Now, this camera has a Sony IMX078 sensor and a Novatech 96660 chipset, so it should perform really well. Now, like a lot of cameras in this price range, it loosely uses the term 4K when referring to resolution, but the reality is this is actually interpolated 4K and not true 4K. So interpolated 4K basically means that the image is recorded at a lower resolution, in this case 2K, and then stretched out to 4K during playback. With that said, there's no benefit to recording in 4K with this camera. In actuality, there's actually a drawback. So this camera uses gyro image stabilization to help stabilize the video. However, when shooting in 4K or interpolated 4K, the stabilizer doesn't work. So depending on whether you use the image stabilization or not, that's something to consider. Or even if you don't use it, it's still pretty pointless to shoot in interpolated 4K. Also on the front, you have an OLED display for managing menu options and your power and mode button. This device is powered by a 1050 milliamp battery, so you can expect about an hour of battery life. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the door that houses the battery because it doesn't have a hinge on it, which basically means you can completely take it off and probably increase your chances of losing it. Now, to get inside the setting for a particular mode, you'll first want to select that mode and then press the right arrow button. Now, I won't go over every setting that this camera has because it has a ton of them, but I will point out some key features. Here you can see your resolution options. WDR is wide dynamic range. Now, when this is turned on, the camera is trying to evenly expose the image from dark to light. So you'll want to keep this off when shooting in brighter areas to avoid overexposing. Now, bitrate will give you more detail, but in turn it will produce a larger file. I'll usually keep this on high. Now, initially when you're setting up your camera, you'll want to go into the date timestamp and turn this off, unless you want the date and time stamped on your footage. Now, the angle refers to the field of view. So like I said earlier, a larger angle will give you a wider shot but invite more distortion. A smaller angle will reduce image distortion but also reduce quality, and it'll also give you a smaller field of view. So depending on what your situation is, you'll have to kind of pick your poison. Here you have your photo settings. Now, this camera can shoot up to 12 megapixels. It can also shoot RAW or JPEG format. Now, I did have some trouble opening up the RAW files. I tried it in Lightroom and in Photoshop RAW. So I don't know if it's just this particular unit or if there's a problem with the RAW files in general. Alright, now the first person footage from the intro was shot with the Firefly, so that'll give you an idea of how the footage looks in low light conditions. But here's some footage shot from better light conditions. This is interpolated 4K. Now I did render this in 1080p, but if this was true 4K, depending on what you're viewing this video on, you'd still notice a difference. Now as I said earlier, when you're shooting in interpolated 4K, the gyro stabilizer doesn't work. So this is how the footage looks without stabilization. Now here's some footage shot in 2K, and you can clearly see the difference in terms of stabilization. Now the gyro stabilization does work, but it did seem to be a bit jerky compared to some others. Now here's some footage shot at 1080 at 60 frames per second. And this is how the audio sounds without the waterproof case. What you're listening to now is audio from the Firefly 7S. Okay, so now on to my opinion of this camera. Now I'm not sure why they marketed these specs in such a way to mislead the consumer, because even though this camera isn't 4K and the lens isn't distortionless, it's still a really good camera at this price point. For less than $100, you're getting a lot of features, some of which even more expensive cameras don't have. Now yeah, 4K would be better, and this camera could have a better image stabilizer, but when you start talking about fixing that stuff, then now you're talking about a more expensive camera. So I think they did a really good job balancing the price and the features, the actual features. So overall, I think it's a really good deal for the price. Now I do know that in September, GearBest is having some huge promotional sales. So if you're interested in this camera, or you've had your eye on something else over there, there's a really good chance that you may be able to get it even cheaper, so be sure to keep an eye out. But as always, I'll leave links in the description to this device and some comparable devices that are currently on flash sale. So until next time, peace.